And welcome back to Meeting of the Minds. Today I'm here with the great Ed Deutschlander, the CEO at the North Star Resource Group, and just great all-around man, author, double sport athlete in college. Ed, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's a real honor, Gene. Really appreciate it. Looking forward to sharing today.
Absolutely. All right, let's jump right into it. Talk about your childhood and growing up and how that led you to be a double sport athlete. Start there.
Sure. Yeah. No problem. Let's see. Grew up in Chicago in a big Catholic family, the oldest of 6 children, and lived in the city itself. And growing up in Chicago, really appreciate it. It was just it was a great small little neighborhood, if you will. Big city, but they have all these little neighborhoods. And just a lot of the values, obviously, that I adhere to and are such a big part of my life stem from my childhood. And it was interesting because my family, very modest financial background. Actually, for that matter, we were on a host of subsidized type programs and things. But I never knew we were poor, if you will. And it's a compliment to my parents because there was so much love in the household. Had no idea that we had zero financial resources, really until probably high school came along. I went to an all-boys Catholic school in Chicago, and because of our family's financial situation, I received financial aid to go to the school, had the grades to get in, and had a work-study program. So I actually had to pay for some of my tuition working in high school. And that was a big teaching point for me, frankly, because I would have about a 10-minute lunch period. My peers would have a 30 to 40-minute lunch period. I had about 10 minutes to eat, and then I would then have to go behind the wall in the cafeteria, and I would have to load the industrial dishwasher with all the trays, spray them down and put them in there. And I did that every single day during lunch. And my parents taught me a real valuable lesson because I was a little frustrated at the time, just talking about how I couldn't enjoy my lunch hour, hang out with my friends. And they said, that is the dollar amount per hour you are earning is paying for you to go to high school. Think about that. That 25 to 30 minutes is taking off so much money off your tuition. And so that work study, that work ethic and everything kind of got inculcated at a very young age. Frugality, sharing what you have, being the oldest of 6 kids. And that just, that foundation, that was all built at that stage. And then during my sophomore year of high school, we moved from Chicago to Minnesota. And that, that's a big transition. When you're 16 years old, having to move. But again, adversity not only builds character, adversity reveals character. I did not like the move whatsoever, was very much against it. But my parents, hey, my dad's job changed. We have to move to the Twin Cities. And fortunately, because I played sports, I was able fairly quickly to adapt, make some new friends. And but that taught me a lot of lessons too. It just taught me how to move from one environment to another. Life is full of uncertainty. Life is full of changes. And when you have a lot of siblings looking up to you, that role model. So my father would pull me aside every now and then when I got negative and just reinforce that, hey, you have siblings looking up to you. So kind of how you go, they will follow. And that was something that was just reinforced all the time. And then from there, was good enough in sports to start attracting the attention of some smaller colleges. Ended up going to Macalester College, a small liberal arts college in St. Paul, Minnesota, Division III school, and went there to play football, obviously to get an education as well, but was very interested in continuing playing football and just loved it. That was a great transition. Regardless of what level I think one participates at in college, being a college student athlete teaches you so many things. It teaches you time management. The competitive spirit continues on. It teaches you the discipline, the daily grind, if you will, and the ability just to perform under pressure. And at a very academic school, and in some ways, the Division III path is extremely challenging because it really is the student athlete, and there are no scholarships. Now, I received, fortunately, a Pell Grant. I should mention, I was a first-gen college student. Neither of my parents went to college. And so I was first-generation college, a Pell Grant recipient. And again, between the Pell Grant, some scholarships the school provided me, work study, I was able, because my parents were able to contribute anything financially, I was able to pay for a pretty high-priced tuition school, if you will. But, in those smaller schools, you're playing the sport because you love it. That's it. I mean, that is it. It's not as if there's an athletic scholarship there. And so you really have to learn to do the time management. That's where I realized it's not time management, it's priority management. You can't manage time. And my priorities were very simple. It was, I really wanted to be a scholar athlete. I wanted to get very good grades. I wanted to challenge myself. They kind of made, frankly, I don't know if I should share this, but I think they made an exception, letting me into school, literally. I know for a fact the football coach went and lobbied because my grades are pretty good. My test score is pretty good, but probably wasn't what the typical Macalester student was. But it's so important. It's another great lesson to have advocates in your life, people who are willing to go to bat for you and to acknowledge that and never let those people down. I knew that football coach went to the admissions office and said, take a chance on this young man. And that, that meant a lot. So I was not going to let him down. So I studied really hard, was working, hard on the field, off the field, the classroom. And then that journey led to a very interesting one in that my wife now of 29 years, her and I started dating in high school. We were high school sweethearts. And we got married our first semester, junior year of college at the age of 20 and became parents shortly after. And that was one of the biggest wake-up calls a person could have. When you are 20 years old, you're now a husband, you're now a father, you have half of your college career left in front of you. And at that point in time, my wife and I, Tony, we just said, we're going to make this work. We're going to make this work. And when you're determined enough, when you have, a big enough why, those goals as aspirations, and I didn't want to compromise anything. I wanted to continue playing football and baseball. I wanted, to stay in school because I had friends, frankly, who are in similar situations, and they dropped out, got a full-time job, support their family. Very understandable, very noble. But we both decided, hey, we're going to make this work. And so I continued on that path and was working a job in the evening, work study, in between practices, just changing diapers. And my daughter actually would come to practice with us. I remember specifically for baseball practice, the trainers, I had a playpen. I actually had a playpen in the back of the locker room in the storage equipment area. I would pull the playpen out. I'd get to practice about 20 minutes early, set this playpen up, put my daughter Ashley in there, built a plywood top with a bunch of holes in it to put over, heaven forbid, an air and foul ball. And then the trainers were kind enough, while I was at practice, about 150 yards away from the practice facility, there would be my daughter with the trainers. And I would run in water breaks, literally run over and check on my daughter. I mean, think about that. You're 2020. You just figure out how to get stuff done. And yeah, so those are just some of the things that my childhood. And then when it came time to my career, I had every aspiration to be a teacher and a coach. I really thought I was going to be an educator. My degree was in psychology. That was my major with a concentration in education. I had my certification to be a secondary teacher, did my student teaching my first semester of my senior year in college. Enjoyed it, but that was eye-opening for me, where I said, I like teaching. I could see myself doing this, but I don't know if I want to jump in quite yet. I kind of saw my life unfold a little bit, where I knew that there was so much certainty, it almost discouraged me, because I had, there's a lot of uncertainty in my life, a lot of things thrown at me, and all of a sudden it's like, boy, do I, like 55 years old, I'm going to be in this type of classroom. And it's not a good time, by the way, to go home to tell your wife, who made a sacrifice to drop out of college to get a full-time job so you can finish college. And the deal was, I had pressure to go out and get a job and say, hey, honey, I don't know if I really want to be a teacher. She said, you kidding me? You're 4 months up before you graduate. You better figure out what you want to do here. So I hit that interview path hard and completely stumbled across the financial services industry. My father-in-law, wonderful man, beautiful human being, very supportive from day one, which took a lot of courage on his part to give his daughter over to a 20-year-old who, my goodness, they have a college degree and all the chaos that was going on. But he was always very supportive. Another great lesson that is, just continue to love people. Love people. It's easy to love people when they're at their best. Real love is when it's, when times are tough and at their worst. So he always poured out that love. So anyways, he was a very successful small business owner. So I just said heart to heart and said, what are your thoughts? And he said, you might want to consider something in sales. It's relationship oriented. You control your own destiny. You have a lot of traits and characteristics that might bode well with that. High energy, you're very disciplined, coachable, you're determined. There's a lot of good things that might be in that future for you. So I started looking at sales opportunities, a lot of them financial services sales, stumbled across North Star Resource Group, just fell in love with the calling of the career, the people, the values. And from there, was fortunate enough to get an offer towards the end of my senior year of college. Literally graduated from college on a Saturday afternoon, took Sunday off and started at North Star, the very firm I have the privilege and honor of serving as CEO today. Started there on Monday. And I jokingly, but in some ways, truthfully, tell people, and that Sunday between graduation and starting on Monday was my last day off. And because even though I've worked very hard, and when you really love what you do, it's not work. You don't have to take days off. It's just part of who you are. So that's kind of a quick, maybe 6-7 minute overview in terms of the journey, but a lot of really important foundational lessons that have just served me so well on a lot of fronts, and maybe kind of who the person I am today.
Absolutely. That's great. I'm taking notes the whole time. I'm jotting down different things you say here, because I was going to ask you, what are some of the mindsets or the characteristics, the virtues to be a champion? And you already mentioned a whole bunch here that I know you speak about in your book also, which I'd like you to hold up in a minute. But discipline. Yeah. Let's see it. Yeah. Let's see that book.
Yeah. As far as that, discipline's huge. I mean, that's I think one of the key ones in the book. Yeah, I'm happy to hold it up. Thanks. I got right here. Yeah, Be the First Believer. This was my first book. I wrote about 7 years ago now, and it was just I wrote this because just people encouraged me to write it, and the subtitle is Leadership Life Lessons, and it's just it was all a series of principles and things that served me well growing up. What I would do is I kind of did journaling before it was maybe popular. I would just reflect, just my upbringing under getting trained by the Jesuits, if you will, with some of my education in Catholic schools, and just that daily examination, just processing the day, thinking about it. And over time, I would pick up just these messages and kind of build out these headlines that I would capture, like in a newspaper headline, and just collected them. And eventually, in my leadership and management responsibilities, I would share some of these principles and apply them that had served me well. And then folks just started encouraging me, saying, you should write a book about this stuff, because I'd give presentations on a periodic basis. So eventually I just went ahead, and at the time I have an airplanes traveling. Some people sleep in planes, some watch movies. I just write. So that's how the book came out. But discipline's probably the biggest thing. When you thoroughly think about it, if you have discipline, it's the greatest thing in the world. People forget that, habits are beautiful things. When people hear habits, they think of all these bad habits. Well, it's just that you can form good habits too. And here's the interesting part. Good habits are just as hard to break as bad habits. So, it's amazing. It's like the grind of working out. When you form the habit of working out, you can't break it. Even if you want to take a day off sometimes, you just end up, it's like a magnetic pull. You end up in the gym, or you end up throwing your running shoes on and you're out for a run. It's the same thing with reading. I can't stress enough the importance of reading. You learn is train to read every day for 15, 20 minutes. It's amazing. You can't help it. You just find yourself gravitating to that book. And if you read for 15, 20 minutes a day, one of the headlines in the book is today's readers are tomorrow's leaders. I learned that a long time ago. And it's so true. You read 15, 20 minutes a day, you'll finish 20 to 30 books a year. That's just physically reading. Then for those who enjoy podcasts and listening to audiobooks and those other things, it's amazing what can be done. So yeah, so many things have just stemmed from these journeys in life.
I love it. Here's some of the other virtues that you mentioned, the other qualities. Yeah. You said having a purpose, being able to pivot, being the oldest, you had to be a role model, frugality, work ethic, giving back, loving other people, even when it's difficult, competitiveness, time management, but it's not time management, it's priority management, and just leadership. I know you hit on a lot of those themes in your book. Talk about some of that. I know that's a lot.
Yeah, well, I would say if there's one foundational piece, it would be something I call A&E. If you want to be successful, simply watch A&E. And it's a little bit of play on words because people hear that, they think of the arts and entertainment, network, but it's really attitude and effort. It's amazing how we get so preoccupied with our precious mental space of things we have absolutely no control over. None. Right now, we're filming this, we're doing this the day before the presidential election. Now, do we have some influence over that? We do, a little influence. We get one vote. But the time and energy we can put into what do we control? We control at every moment in our life, there's two things we have absolute complete control over. That is our attitude. And the other thing is the effort we put towards any endeavor. Outside of that, I would say we have influence over a lot of things, but even more, most things we have no control over whatsoever in this world. So we tend to focus way too much on the things we have no control over at the expense of the things we have influence over, and really at the expense of the things we have complete control over, our attitude and effort. So I just remind people, and myself all the time, throughout the day, a series of little reminders, little things that, okay, check in. How's your attitude right now? You control that. And it's not easy. There's so many external factors that wash over us that can get us off track. We're human. We're susceptible. We're not immune to these things. But it takes discipline to say, all right, I'm not necessarily having the greatest day, but I can turn it around mentally. I'm choosing right now to either let the day control me, or I'm going to control the day. I'm going to control my attitude and mood, and not to let our emotions get the best of us. That's the thing. We have a tendency, I learned a long time ago, that in life, there's going to be many, many, many disappointments, even on a daily basis. People are going to disappoint you, and guess what? You're going to disappoint people. You're going to disappoint others. So when that happens, don't overreact. That's a tendency people have. They overreact, and when you overreact, what happens is oftentimes you destroy relationships. And, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. Just, it's pull back, focus, have the discipline to not let your emotions, and I'm not saying be emotional. I'm the opposite. To me, I really struggle. It's my heritage with with my nationalities and just my upbringing and a lot of things. I'm a very emotional person. I wear my heart on my sleeve, but I work so hard. And that's the other thing. You gotta know yourself. Know yourself, and when you understand who you are, it enables you to really figure out, okay, what are the things I have to work on and guard carefully and not put myself in those types of situations because I know my tendencies, I know my nature. And that's the thing, where are spots where I got to be all the time because I have some certain gifts and certain talents. But people don't take enough time today, frankly, just to think and reflect. We have so many distractions in the world. Every single, look at this. Look at right now, what we're using this device for is very productive. It's a very good thing. But 5 minutes later, this thing can be distraction city, movies, video games. And I'm not saying that there's a time and place for those things, and we have to prioritize. So, getting distractions out of your life as much as possible. It's important. It's important to do that. Otherwise, before long, too much time passes, and you ask yourself, "My goodness, what What did I do? My grandfather taught me a beautiful saying. He said, there comes a time every winter where winter will ask you, what did you do all summer? And he taught me that. Growing up in Chicago, I'd go up to, my father grew up in a small town in Wisconsin on a farm, and I'd go up to my grandfather's in the summer as a little kid, and he would have me do all these chores, and we'd be out chopping wood. And it's July. What are we doing? It's a hot day. We're chopping wood. Why? For that very reason. In winter will ask you, what'd you do all summer? If you chop your wood in the summer, hey, it's great. You sweat a little bit. It's a beautiful day. And, in the wintertime, chopping wood is not fun. It's cold. But it's one of those things that it's like Thoreau said, chop your own wood, you warm yourself twice. And there's a lot of truth in those things. So I'm throwing a lot at you here, but you're kind of leaving it open. So I'm just kind of going down the path, whatever highway that you open up, I'll take that exit. Sound good?
That's it. Far be it from us to disrupt the organic flow. No, but I'll get a little more specific with you. As you're speaking, I start to think as a business owner myself, and what questions I would ask you with your expertise. Clearly, you're a positive person. You're a very driven person. You're a very caring person. So when managing other people, of course, you're positive with them. You are leading by example. How do you best deal with people when maybe they're not having the same kind of drive, or they're not putting out the work output that they should be doing? So balancing the being firm but loving. Yeah,
it's a great question. We have a tendency to want to treat people exactly the way we want to be treated. And, that's not necessarily, you got to meet people where they are. We've heard that before. You got to figure out, it's knowing who your players are. I was never a systems guy as an athlete. I really appreciate coaches who looked at their players, assessed the talents, and then built the system around the players. Then versus here's the system, regardless, because sometimes you may have the talent to execute the system, sometimes not. I think it takes creativity. It takes a lot more effort to say, forget the system, what people do we have, and how do we build around those people and those strengths? So I think number one, it's getting to know your people, caring about them. When people know that you care about them and have their best interest first and foremost, and the foundation of all this is it's all about servant leadership. Whenever you're running any organization, whether it's your family, whether it's a business, whether it's a team, whether it's an association, a community, or whatever, a church, a parish, a synagogue, a mosque, doesn't matter. It comes down to servant leadership. And always remember this, leadership is a service business. Leadership is a service business. If you don't understand it's about serving others, and serving others starts with understanding who they are. And the other thing is, sometimes you have to have an understanding of your abilities and not necessarily expect other people to have the same aspirations or same drive and all that stuff. I like to test people's capacity. I think it's really good to find out how far someone can go. And it's amazing because if you continue to test people's capacity, you will be amazed how people will so pleasantly surprise you. Sometimes we put our own self-imposing beliefs like, well, I could never do that. Or just because you couldn't do it doesn't mean that person can't do it. So, challenge them in a positive manner. Get them to get out there, and it's belief. It comes down to belief. And there's some of the most powerful words in the English language. I like to share this often because we don't share it often enough. And that is the three most powerful words you can say in English is, I love you. Those are the three most powerful words. The four most powerful words, I believe in you. Those are the four most powerful words. And the five most powerful words, I am proud of you. Think about that. And when you tell someone you love them, when you tell someone you believe in them, when you tell someone you're proud of them, it is amazing what happens. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. So, and the other thing I already mentioned earlier, don't overreact. People are going to disappoint you when you're leading them. They're going to disappoint you. And don't forget, you're going to disappoint them sometimes. But if you have this foundation built around love, belief, hope, and really around the commitment to each other. And if you're committed to a cause, committed to each other, it's pretty special what can happen. But as a leader, there's two fundamental roles you have. Number one, you got to be the culture builder. And number two, you got to be the culture keeper. And I think it's actually harder to keep a culture than to build it. You know, you build it, you have your values, you know, which guide your decision making. You know, when your decisions are clear, when your values are clear, decisions are easy. When your values are clear, decisions are easy. So you build this culture up. Now you got to maintain that culture. And that's where all the tough decisions are, and people are going to watch you and observe you and all those things. So, and one last thing I'll just hit on is rules. Be careful about rules. And what I mean by, I'm a big believer in having guardrails, parameters. But rules, when you make a rule, nothing wrong with rules, but you got to enforce it. And I see too much in leadership. Rules are made, and then they paint themselves in a corner, put themselves in a box because they didn't anticipate all the nuances with that rule. And now they either got to maybe stick to the rule, which destroys maybe the spirit of what's going on, or maybe the exception that is needed in that case, or they scratch the rule, which then all of a sudden sends a message that there aren't really any rules. So be careful about those things, if that makes sense.
Guardrails instead of rules. That sounds good.
Yeah, have parameters. Give yourself the ability for flexibility. So that's the thing is, there's so much rigidity, and there's a time and place for, you know. I'm not saying there's rules are necessary, but man, we make a lot of rules, and we always tend to make the rules around the least common denominator. And maybe that was the exception. And let's not overreact. We made this pendulum, and with all these rules into place, and now it slows the organization down, the team down, etc.
Excellent. And then, yeah, so that's a lot of great stuff right there. We hit on already a tremendous amount of practical information. How about culture building during a time of COVID, where it's all virtual? How do you maintain that culture during this period?
Yeah, well, I would say more of it's kind of an ancillary route, not so much culture building. To me, this is culture maintaining at this stage, and that is, and that's one of the things I'm concerned about, frankly, for a lot of organizations, where, you know, on the surface, productivity might be good, but productivity could be masking a lot of things. And the one thing you have is when you don't have people gathering together, connecting with each other. That's where, over time, that culture can get eroded pretty quickly. And people don't join companies. We have a saying: people don't join companies. People join people and causes. And that cause is your culture. So we're very protective of our culture. So we've been working like mad, frankly, very deliberately. It's not an afterthought. What keeps me up at night during all this is, how do we maintain our culture? Because our culture is so strong. And making sure that our leadership team is connecting with as many people as possible. How do we have virtual events? How do we be sensitive to Zoom fatigue, but at the same time make sure people feel appreciated and acknowledged and all that stuff? So you gotta come up with it's a true strategy. I mean, it's sitting there to culture maintenance and maintaining a high performance, no excuse culture it's something that it's like growing a beautiful garden. And you got to tend it every single day. You got to water it. You got to pull the weeds. So we're constantly, every single week, we're spending a lot of time amongst, you know, leadership team, just making sure that people are reached out to, they're being touched, that we're having the proper outlets, they're being acknowledged, and just having gratitude. And that's so important. Where if there's a foundation of gratitude, it's hard to go wrong. It's when that gratitude slowly dissipates, that's when a lot of other, you know, things come into play, which can really impact the culture. But you gotta be paying attention at all times. That's for sure.
Right.
And just little strategies. And just every morning, every morning at least 5 to 10 compliments and acknowledgments are going out before really, you know, anything even occurs, before even the roosters are crowing. These are 5:30, 6 a.m. Emails are going out. recognizing people from the day before, from various reports and various things, and just letting them know that you're paying attention, you're thinking about them, you're seeing the progress they're making, you're there for them. That's so important. The handwritten notes and whatever, the phone calls, the voicemail messages, the texts. I tell you, it is, and it's not always about the professional life too. It's just checking in with people, seeing how they're doing, letting them know you care. These are fundamentals. But I tell you what, there's a story. Do we have a minute for a quick story? I'll share a story. It's a story I like to talk about. And it's this gentleman who owns a fish market. And this fish market, elderly gentleman, the sign above the fish market, very simple. It says, "Fresh fish for sale," 4 words. And one day, some of the patrons walk into the fish market and they ask the owner, "Is there a reason to have the word fresh on your sign? We know, every morning you get up early, you go out and get the day's catch, you bring it into the market. Is it really necessary?" He thinks about it, he says, "Yeah, you're right." So he takes the word fresh off the sign. So now it just says fish for sale. Some more time passes. Again, some patrons come into the market and ask the elderly gentleman, the owner, "Is there a reason to have for sale on your sign? We know you're for profit. We know you sell beautiful fish and seafood here. Is it necessary?" So he thinks about it, says, "Yeah, probably right." So he moves the word for sale. So at one time, the sign said fresh fish for sale. So fresh is gone. Now for sale is gone. So now there's just one word on the sign, fish. Well, again, some more time passes. Once again, some patrons come in and mention to the owner, "Is there a reason you have fish on your sign? We walk down the pier, we smell the aromas, we know what you do here. Is there really a reason for fish?" He thinks about it, says, "Yeah, probably right. I'm getting older. It's a hassle to climb up the ladder and keep the sign in shape all the time and looking beautiful. I'm just taking the word fish off." So now there's nothing on the sign. Guess what happened to that beautiful fish market within the next year? Guess what happened?
Bankrupt.
It went out of business. And people, I share that simple story because here's what happened. In that story, it's the perfect depiction of something I call the slow erosion of the fundamentals. The slow erosion of the fundamentals. See, imagine if someone went up to you and said, "I have a great idea, Gene. Take the sign off of your store." You would say, "You're nuts. What are you talking? Why would I do that?" But isn't that in essence what they did to that store owner? The reason is because it didn't happen in one cataclysmic, massive event. It happened in small little stages, word by word. And that's, as leaders, what we need to do. And that is, we have to be just vigilant about being brilliant on the basics. And we use that phrase all the time. We borrowed it from professional. Be brilliant on the basics and don't let the slow erosion of the fundamentals occur. And it's not reading for a day or two. It's skipping that workout. It's not making those calls you need to make in the sales profession. It's not following up on that lead. It's not, there's 1,000 excuses. It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. The little things done right allow the big things to go right. When you do the little things right, everything else falls into place. If you don't do the little things right, the big things will never go right. So that's, as leaders, we got to be teaching these fundamental principles, and that is, watch out for the slow erosion of the fundamentals. That's what gets the very best of whether it's businesses, relationships. Think about that, relationships. It's usually, why that relationship deteriorates over time? You know why that marriage? Well, it's because of slow erosion of the fundamentals. If the fundamentals were there and guarded, doesn't happen. So you read all these brilliant business books on leadership and growth and progress and innovation, and they're all great. I consume them all the time. I love them. But those threads, if you strip everything away, it comes down to just, if you stay focused on those core fundamentals, man, good things happen. And I love to say, be faithful to what is helpful. People abandon. Be faithful. If it works for you, man, doesn't matter. It doesn't have to work for everyone else. If it works for you, stick to it, guard it with your life, especially if it's getting results. Don't abandon it. Be faithful to what is helpful.
Awesome. Both the theory and the phenomenally practical advice. I think that's the place to end it. I could ask you 20 more questions, Ed. I love speaking with you. Great information. Thank you very much. Hold up that book one more time, please.
You bet. Be the First Believer, Leadership Life Lessons. And hopefully you got a few things out of it. Really enjoyed it. It's a real honor. And, we got to keep believing. And by the way, I should mention, be the first believer. Guess who you got to believe in first and foremost? Yourself. You got to believe in yourself. Then you got to believe in others. And if that's what we keep doing, we keep believing in ourselves, believing in others, amazing things happen.
That's awesome. Thank you, Ed. And I hope that everyone who's watches this, rewatch it here with a notepad, because I'm scribbling notes the whole time. I need to copy this down in a clean notebook now. Thank you, Ed. I appreciate it. God bless you.
Very good. God bless you. Be well. Take care.